On this episode, I'm going to be talking to you about how you can best use your power meter to give you the best chance of a really good run off the bike at Ironman. And the really good news here is that if you learn to use your power meter correctly, it really is like a cheat code for Ironman. It really can give you there's no guarantees in life, but a guarantee, I think, of the best possible chance of having a really good run and taking loads of the guesswork out of whether or not you're going to have enough energy left to have a really good run at the end of an Ironman. So the first thing I want to stress to you here is there is no such thing as having a good bike leg at Ironman and then a poor run. There's no such thing. And if you hear people talking after a race and saying, I had a fantastic bike split and then it all fell apart on the run and nothing worked out the way that I thought it was going to, well, the reality for most people is they rode too hard on the bike. Similarly, for people who experience, let's say, gastric distress, if they find they've got to go to the bathroom or they've been throwing up when they get onto the run, oftentimes that is a problem in the pacing of the bike leg and going too hard relative to their fitness and threshold, rather than something more nefarious than that. And that's something that a lot of athletes who've made a mistake of going too hard find really, really hard to hear. The feedback of, you're probably responsible for this problem, is something that a lot of people, they either don't want to admit to themselves or they're looking externally for solutions. I think that is really a reality for a lot of athletes who've come to us and had these problems. Once we put them through our program and put them through our preparation and they know exactly what numbers they're aiming for on race day, those gastric problems go away. Those problems of a good bike and a poor run go away. And it all starts with knowing how hard you can ride on the bike safely and still be sure that you're going to be able to have a good run off the bike at the end of it. And that's ultimately what a power meter is really, really useful for at Ironman distance racing. The way we go about this, there's a bit of maths involved in this and you have to use some software to do it. But even for those of you who are quite technophobic, we can give you some really good guidelines here that you can practice in training. And at the very least, I think what people will realize is there is a reasonable level of effort that you can do in an Ironman relative to your own fitness and still expect to be able to run well off the bike. And the first takeaway here is that reasonable level of effort is probably quite a lot lower than you think it is or you'd like to admit to yourself. And part of the problem here is, well, not the problem, I guess, but the challenge is Instagram and professional athletes sharing their power numbers, posting their bike splits, posting their power numbers afterwards, posting the percentages of their FTP they rode at. And then normal people, age groupers, looking at those numbers and thinking, well, if Joe Skipper or Lionel Sanders is riding at 80, 81% of FTP for their Ironman, I should be able to as well. And there's no problem with those guys sharing their numbers. I think it's fantastic because it gives us a really great insight into what they're doing at the very top end. But here's a very big caveat. Most age groupers, or almost all, I'm going to say almost all, I really mean all age groupers, are not professional athletes. They are not Joe Skipper. They are not Lucy Charles Barkley. They don't have the same physiology and background. And so you have to expect and accept it's going to be different for you. You have to set those sights lower. And in lots of cases, honestly, it's quite a lot lower than you think it's going to be in order to preserve your ability to run well off the bike. Okay, so that's the first caveat. I remember years ago doing an Ironman and talking with the guy before the race and him telling me what bike split he was going to do. And I knew the Bolton course really well. And I said to him, you know, I'd be really careful riding that fast and that hard on this bike course. It's a really tricky bike course and you want to save yourself for the run. And he kind of shrugged his shoulders and said, you know, I'm fit enough to go and do this. What ended up happening was he did ride the bike split he said he was going to, which was about 30 minutes faster than me. And I passed him with about 5 miles to go in the marathon and he was walking and beat him by about an hour. The reason being, I think he was fitter than me on the day and he should have beaten me and beaten me well because he'd used more of his fitness on the bike leg to get that sub 5:30 that he wanted on the bike at Bolton that year. He blew himself up totally for the run and ended up having a horrible overall experience in the triathlon. And it came down to that ego of wanting to do a particular time on the bike. And I think that's a big challenge for a lot of athletes. if you have your eyes set on a particular time on the bike, if it's whatever, sub 6 hours, sub 7 hours, sub 5 hours, whatever that number is, there is no way that that is leading you to good decision making for you to have your best run off the bike. What we should be doing is working the maths and saying, what I want to do is ensure at all costs I have a really good run off the bike here, no matter what the time says on the clock at the end of the bike leg is irrelevant if I have a fantastic run and I feel awesome at the end of it. And honestly, your memory of an Ironman will largely be determined by your memory of the last 10 miles of the marathon, not by the time on the clock on the bike leg, for sure. So, in order to give you a feel and a reading for how hard you can reasonably expect to go on the bike and still run well, we're going to set a TSS cap. So, talked on previous episodes about TSS, that stands for Training Stress Score. That's just a way of quantifying how hard you're going over what period of time. A TSS score of 100 is riding at threshold for an hour. And usually for a lot of people, we're looking at around 50 TSS points per minute, give or take, for a sort of steady ride at the weekends. So that's kind of the area we're looking at for an Ironman bike leg to give you some kind of feel for it, 40 to 50 points an hour. We're going to set a TSS cap of 280 TSS points for your bike leg. This is regardless of who you are and how fast you are. And this is where you can go away and do some research here. You can go and look at the power files from the pros who share their numbers, and you'll see their TSS scores on the days they run really well off the bike come in at around this number. Okay, so 280 TSS points on the bike, and we can be pretty sure or very sure that you're going to be able to run well and run close to your potential, if not at your potential, come the marathon. If everything else is equal, fueling's gone well, all of those things. Okay, so the next thing to be aware of is that TSS cap means that people who are different speeds are going to have to be riding at different percentages of their FTP. So if we take, I use Joe Skipper or Lionel Sanders as an example, getting very close to 4 hours for the bike leg, they can be riding at 80, 82, maybe even 84% of their FTP because they'll be finished with the bike leg in 4 hours. For an athlete who's slower and might be taking 7.5, 8 hours on the bike, they can't be riding at the same relative percentage of FTP because it's going to be twice the training stress that the pros experience. So their relative percentage has to be lower. And as a rule of thumb for most age groupers, we're going to advise you to be in the 60 to 70% of FTP range come Ironman race day. So faster athletes, those down close to and under 5 hours towards the 70% area, slower athletes down toward the 60% area, and possibly even lower than that if you need to be. The key is you have to preserve your chance of running well off the bike at the end of it. So we take our TSS cap of 280 points and we then go to Best Bike Split. It's a software package that's online and it's free to use. It's no affiliation to us, just go out and Google it. And it can do some maths and you tell it all kinds of facts about you, what your threshold power is, how heavy you are, what kind of bike you're riding, what your aerodynamic drag is, and it's got ways of working that out if you don't know it. And it can then predict what time you're going to do on the bike, given your 280 TSS budget, if you like, and it will then tell you what percentage of FTP you can afford to ride at overall in terms of normalized power. And for most people, they get that number and they go, oh, that's quite a bit lower than I thought it was going to be. And that's okay. We encourage all of our athletes to do this. With the athletes we coach, we do it a minimum of 5 weeks out before race day. They do it before their first race sim weekend. And then they can go out and they can practice these things in training and they know they're going to be able to deliver it on race day. Okay, so 280 TSS points, use Best Bike Split to predict your bike time, and then it can then give you what your bike time will be, what your percentage of FTP, and you can even play with the numbers with some of the sliders in Best Bike Split and work out, the effect of what would happen if I went from a road bike to a time trial bike. What would happen if I put race wheels on? What would happen if I put a skin suit on? You can see in real time the numbers going up or down and the effect those things will have. And again, if you're the kind of athlete who's never experienced that and hasn't experienced having a skin suit or an aero helmet or race wheels, that's a really good way to simulate the effect it's going to have, because people are often mind blown that those things combined can make 20, 30, 40 minutes difference to an Ironman bike time just on the correct equipment choices. Okay. So once we've gone away and we've worked out what percentage of FTP is likely that we're going to be able to ride for how long we have to ride for on race day on the course we're given, the next thing you have to do is the hard work. You have to go out and you have to do your race simulation rides over similar terrain that you're going to race in on race day, at similar percentages of FTP that you're going to produce on race day. And then your body will get used to putting out those kinds of power, and your brain will get used to putting out those kinds of power, and you'll know how it feels well before race day. Now, like I've said, with athletes we coach, I appreciate if our athletes are listening to this, this will be old news to them. We do this in our race sim weekends. We do it in our race planning document. People who've been on our Ironman preparation webinars have had access to those. If you've not had a chance to use them yet, do it well in advance of your race, because the more prepared you are for this, the more times you can go out and practice it with less guesswork involved, the better prepared you're going to be. And honestly, come race day, what I want is loads of emails from listeners telling me how good a run they had on race day, even though they might have had to ride a bit slower than they thought they wanted to, and what a great experience it was to be able to run the whole marathon rather than walking the last 10 miles, like so many other people you'll see have to do come race day. And this all comes down to preparation. There's no secrets here. We give away all of this stuff. And I know my business advisor said to me loads of times that they think we're wrong by doing this, by telling people publicly how to do this. I think all ships rise with the tide. The more athletes we've got out there who get good advice and who do good races, well, it'd be brilliant if some of them became coached athletes of ours in the future. But what I care about is more people having good experiences at races. Okay. So I really do think, coming back to the start of this episode, if you know how to use your power meter correctly, it is like a cheat code for Ironman, but you have to be aware of what you need to do ahead of time. You can't just turn up with a power meter on race day and expect it to be a magic fix for everything. It all comes down to the kind of practice and preparation, and frankly, the number and the quality of the rides that you've done in training relative to what you'll be expected to do come race day. Okay, then. That brings us to the end of this week's episode. So here are some discount codes and deals for you. Over at precisionfuelandhydration.com, use the code OXYGEN24 for 15% off your first electrolyte order. And over at teamoxygenaddict.com, I think we've got the most comprehensive triathlon coaching program for busy age groupers. If you've enjoyed what you've heard today and the advice has helped you out, well, great stuff. I hope that's helped put some of your fears at rest. And I know from some of the calls we've had, it's helping raise the right questions in the minds of people as to whether their current coaching relationship is working for them. If you're looking for a change, or if you're looking for high quality, proven coaching for Ironman or 70.3 triathlon this year, you can just check out the details of our coaching packages on our website at teamoxygenaddict.com. And then if you're interested, there's a link in the show notes below. You can join our waiting list and you'll be notified if a slot becomes available. And at that point, you'll have a chance to book a call with us and see if you'd be a good fit for joining the team. So although we don't have slots available at the moment, we'll make those call appointments available to people as and when we do have athletes who end their coaching packages during the season, if and when that happens. So remember, there's links in the show notes, so you don't have to remember them. Till next week, have a great, safe training and racing week. I'm Coach Rob Wilby, and you've been listening to the Oxygen Addict podcast. See ya.